This is it's barely scripted. What you'll be seeing today will be almost beta ready. So I am as frantic as I am about making sure everything's working perfectly. I can't guarantee we won't run into a few bumps along the way. Great. All right, so I put together a quickie slideshow to go over some of just the general behavior of the job server, as well as sort of give a little bit of background. Just take about 3 or 4 minutes to go through this. So job server is sort of a Swiss Army knife, and it generally comes under the umbrella of what I've seen around these days being called a workload automation server, but it actually will be a lot more than that. Um, so for those of you who have been around since the beginning, JobServer has actually been in existence since 2009. And we wrote it as part of our involvement with Deb Shops, who was a pretty big retailer at the time, and we automated just about every data process they had, from you know, what they call T-logs coming in from registers out at up to 300 stores, to sending tax information off to Avalara, to automating loads into GL, ERP. All these things ran through what we call custom plugins in the job server. So the job server is built on the concept of a plugin, meaning that we actually create extensions for it. So the job server is a tool, an environment that runs things. And so we have the notion of a module, which is, what are you doing? Whether it be I need to deal with FTP, or if I need to process a CSV file, or I need to do something custom by integrating with an ERP system. These are all modules, and JobServer can suck them in and use them as part of its automation process. The job servers has and will, once we go to more of a general release, we are going to have a suite of plugins that will hopefully minimize the amount of work that even the guys that are using it now will have to do. So things like full end-to-end, take stuff from SQL Server, write it to an Excel file or a CSV, and then FTP it, email it, or do something else with it as part of a continuous process. So our goal is to create plugins that will that are not just simple things like run a command line or execute a SQL command, but a much broader set of supporting functionality. We're also, with this new version, we're introducing the concept of a custom trigger. So while there's probably not going to be a lot of individual need to write triggers, triggers are how we're starting jobs. And I'm getting ahead of the slides here, so let me zoom in here on this one. Oops. Is there a way to make this bigger? So here's just sort of a basic block diagram of the job server. The job server will have a collection of jobs that have one or more steps, and each of these steps can use any combination of modules from the library. The job itself can either be started manually by an end user, and we're going to show you that through the front end, or you can set up, use one of the trigger options that we're going to provide, or you can write your own. So one possibility would be to write a trigger that looks for data from an IoT suite. You're getting data in from various sensors or whatever, and you could actually have a trigger that's looking for that and kicks off, a process as a result of a particular value from an IoT device. The triggers, as I said earlier, is we're now letting you write custom triggers, so you can create your own triggers. Triggers will determine how does a job get started. If it's happening automatically, you can also start a job manually. And like I said, jobs have one or more steps, and they come from the modules library. We're going to include a bunch of things, and then you'll be able to write your own. So some of this is the same as what we were doing before. We now have multi-step jobs. That's new. We now have triggers, custom triggers, which is new. And of course, we have a whole new user interface to show off. I'm just going to pull up these slides real quick. I this, as I said, was sort of semi-scripted, and I just wanted to at least put these up there for the benefit of the people who might be watching this later, just to talk about some of the key elements once we switch to the user interface. So jobs is, is a collection of one or more steps. Each step will call a module to do some work. You can start a job on demand, or you can set a trigger to start a job as a result of some sort of event, either a scheduler or a file change or some other behavior that we're going to watch. Triggers are how the jobs are started automatically. We have a built-in trigger that'll be a scheduler. The scheduler is richer than it's been in the past, and we'll show you that in the user interface. You can add your own triggers. We are going to be providing a set of triggers, and then you guys will at least show you at the tail end of this how you write your own triggers, if there's an interest in that. And then, of course, I ran out of time, so the modules are the actual plugins, and that's what actually does the work. And I'm going to have Lee a little later show you how quickly you can create a module. It's about, if you have code already written to do something, with about 10, 15 minutes worth of coding, you can have a module that you can throw into the job server and schedule and all that fun stuff. So that's it for the slideshow, and maybe I'll add some more when I send this out separately. But I wanted to get right to the meat of the application and the process. So the environment is two parts. It's the actual service that runs continuously, and then a front-end application that allows you to manage all the jobs that are going on. You can connect to multiple servers. So, if you have, if you have multiple instances of the job server, as we've had in the past, you can connect to each of the servers independently from the same thing. It'll remember who you're connecting to and what your username and password is, if so desired. We've seeded this particular job server with a bunch of sort of fake jobs, just to give it some visual appeal. This job right here is something that I will typically start up and bear with me here. So these jobs, and I'm going to go into them here just to give you a sense of what they're doing. Every job has a name you can give it. You can arrange them in groups. You can add an extended description. So when you come back 3 months later and say, well, what's this job actually supposed to do? You'll have a description for it. Here are all the triggers that we currently have, in play for this demo. I'll actually go into the details of all of this when I create a job. I just wanted to give you an idea of what this looks like. And then here are the steps for the job. So here are all the execution modules that are available. And you can name it, give it a description, and then these are the parameters that go along with the particular execution. So this job, if I look at the details here, this job is scheduled to run. Oh, and I should mention that this is running on a different time zone. This is running on Pacific time, and we have this scheduled to run at 12:05, and it's still. So if I look at the monitor, we can see, I'm going to maximize the window here. You actually can see the jobs are running. The job monitor, for those who've used it in the past, it's got a richer set of information available. It's telling you what step it's running. It actually has a message feedback. So if you're writing a plugin, or module, you can include, where am I in the process? So when you're looking at the monitor, you have, and it's been running for 45 minutes, you have some measure of feedback as to what's going on. You can determine the refresh rate. Every job has a history. So if you wanted to view the history of the execution, there's no history for that job. No history for that job. history. So here's the history of execution for this job, how long it took, what last step it finished, did it finish, did it succeed, did it fail, that sort of thing. There's also a server level log that gives you full details of everything that's going on with the server. And then let's just go to creating a new job. And for those that have used the old system and know that the trigger XML was a royal pain in the butt to manage, this is actually, you know, it's just a pleasure to have to deal with. So, you know, my first job, do I want to put it in a group? You know, show and tell. And then I can pick one of several triggers here. We are going to have more, as I said in the initial part of the conversation. We have a built-in one called Scheduler. We have the File Watcher, which is what we've had in the past. And then this is something that Lee put together just to give you an example, give us an example of, hey, we can create a quick trigger just to do something, you know, meaningless. This is a trigger that runs every 10 seconds, and any job that's scheduled to it will automatically run every 10 seconds. So I can pick that, and you know, if I attach stuff to this job, it's just going to run every 10 minutes. If I go to the File Watcher, you know, I can put in a path. I want to know when something gets created. I want to watch for CSVs, you know, and I want to include subdirectories. So that's an option for file watchers. And then finally, the really important one, which I think most people are going to use regularly, is the scheduler. We've got an extensive amount of scheduling capabilities, so you can do more than once a day, which includes, you know, you can actually establish run windows. You can choose the interval, and choose what days of the week it runs, how many, you know, is it supposed to stop after a particular time, after so many runs. And then you've got a once a day trigger. So if you've got something that needs to run at 1 a.m. every day, you've got that. You can do a weekly, monthly, and we've got we modeled this after the recurrence pattern that you actually have in Outlook. So you can say, you know, on the 6th day of, you know, June, or the, you know, the last weekend day. So you've got a lot more flexibility in scheduling the actual jobs. And so for purposes of this little demo here, I'm going to just do a 30-second timer. And I'm not going to play with any of this because I actually want it to start running while we're on the call here. I'm going to enable the job, and then I'm going to just throw in a command line that, you know, sleep 10, and save that, and then I'm going to do a and this once again is just a dummy plugin that Lee put together for testing purposes. Oops. Job 9.27.0.0.1. So I'm going to save this, and if I go back to our screen here, it picked the next runtime, which is 42, which is coming up. So in about 10 seconds, we should see my job pop into the monitor here and start running automatically. Feel like I need a Jeopardy piece here. There we go. So now my job is running. It's got 2 steps. It's doing the command line wait first, which is a 10-second job, and then it's running the dummy plugin. You can see that this stuff is coming through from the data that I put in, and it's just running a percent to show where it's at. So these jobs are really just meant to exercise the job server. I mean, in practice, you're going to have jobs that, you know, are processing huge data, and it's not going to not everything's going to take, you know, just a few seconds to run. They're going to be here for a while. So one of the things that we also have, and we have a governor that can be put in place. How many jobs can be running at the same time? How many instances of a particular module can be running at the same time? So all those things, you can see here that this is not started because it's waiting for, you know, something to become available. And then waiting means that it's at step 2, but it can't start until, you know, this particular plugin becomes available. So there's a lot of resource control built into the back end as well. Now, one other thing that I want to sort of show from a UI perspective, and maybe just open it to any questions or comments on the user interfaces. We also have a globals. So, you know, if you've got a, you know, my BI database, and you've got, you know, server equals 01, initial catalog equals database, user equals X, password equals Y. So you can create that now, and then in the thing, you can actually go over here and you can say, I want to use my BI database as the parameter for that. And you don't have to have all the parameters set in one place. So hopefully this will automatically, the next time it gets scheduled, we'll pick that up. And I think this is probably one thing that we actually haven't tested. Make sure that it's working properly. Lise, what's your vote of confidence on that working?
I would say it's pretty high.
All right, so maybe it would be this one that it would come in on. No, but unfortunately, we it's our first faux pas on the demo. So that should have changed automatically to, and I'm not sure why it didn't. Oh, maybe I didn't save it. Did I not save it?
Saved it, no.
Oh, that could be my problem. Let's see if that fixes it. I need that Jeopardy music again.
I think that timer every 10 minutes, sleep 180 is going to hold.
I'll just disable that for right now. I should never started that one. That's a big one. While this is running, I'll just also show you that the JobServer is actually much more efficient in terms of memory usage and CPU usage. So it's practically not even involved in consuming. This is running on a VM on Hyper-V with just 2 CPUs assigned to it. It's doing really well. It's using 42 megs as its memory footprint on average, and it really isn't using much of the CPU to do what it's doing.
So is it holding right now because you've got command line
Set for
limited to
one.
one?
Yeah. So
Okay.
command line is set to one instance at a time. So all these other jobs are, sort of waiting for command. In practice, you wouldn't necessarily do this. We just wanted to, I mean, not
Yeah.
that it couldn't happen, but we wouldn't want,
I'm wondering, when you set up a job, is there a way to say only queue one of them?
well, yeah. So I mean, we're working on figuring out, do we need to expose more of that to the end user? Right now, that's actually part of the module. So when you
Hmm.
write something called command line, you have the option of saying, I don't care how many instances are run, or I only want 5 to run, or I want 3 to run, or I want 1 to run. So it's uh,
Well,
and it's
that's running. I'm talking about queued.
oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I guess that's possible. The use case though would be, um,
I
oh, there
have
we
a
go.
use case.
Oh, you do? Okay, there you go. Look at that. So it did pick up on it. It just, um, it must have had them. Um, so you can see now that the global is now being used there as part of the parameter to the job. So, no having to have 27 copies of your database connect string someplace. So, a couple of things that I want to talk about beyond this. One, there is a complete REST interface for the job server. So if you, and this is why I'm saying that this goes beyond just simple automation, you can do everything with the job server that you can do through this user interface. So if you wanted to create an application, a web application, desktop application, whatever that, submitted jobs and monitored them or changed their schedule, you can do that all through the REST API. And I'll show you that in a little bit. I think that is sort of um, the scope of what we, the highlights of the user interface that we have to show right now. Anybody have any questions or suggestions, comments, whatever? Welcome to make note of them.
I got a question.
Sure.
What about notifications?
So we haven't in the past. The jobs were set up to do their own notification. We actually had um, we had it where the job you would supply it with SMTP connectivity, and the job, we almost baked that into every job. We haven't done it yet, but we are going to have a DevOps configuration on the server instance itself. And then while we don't have this completely specced out yet, you can see that we do have some controls here. We're also going to add in, notify on completion or whatever, and then use the generic server level, send an email to this person or SMS or whatever other mechanisms might be available. So this isn't working, and this is one of the last things that we need to sort of code out is, if you have a job that should only take 10 seconds, but for some reason gets stuck, and you say, okay, so after 600 seconds, kill the job, and then either you're terminating the job, or you're sending an email to DevOps to say, hey, the job is past its reasonable run point. And then we have the sort of the same behavior here with regard to, if this particular operation should only take 60 seconds in total, what do I do? Don't, no action, send an email to the DevOps, stop the step, so kill whatever running, and then proceed to the next step or terminate the job. And then you've also got, some action on fail, and I guess we would, include, I don't know whether we would include it here, but we would include it up at this level, certainly with regard to the DevOps stuff. Does that answer your concern question?
Yes.
Okay, great. Anything else? No? Okay. So I'm going to cancel out of this. We don't have a web interface for this yet, but as I said, we do have a fully functioning REST API. So a web interface is not that far off. A mobile app is not that far off. Oops. So for those of you familiar with Postman, I've got this set up to communicate with the server we were just looking at. Basic bare authentication. You call login with some sort of user. Oh, and I should mention as the authentication right now uses AD authentication if you're running on a domain, or it'll use the local authentication if your machine's like a work group or a standalone server. We also have plans to implement security groups so that you can designate certain people, view only, manage, and then create. So the people who are view only can just watch the screen and the blinking lights. The manage will be people that can go in and start and stop jobs and all that fun stuff. And then the creator is the person who actually constructs the job itself, alters the job, that sort of thing. Right now, if you can log in, you're assumed to be God. That's the way we have it right now. So the API is, I think, one of the nicest things around this is that you can call and get a list of all the jobs that are there. You can go to a job, and let me see. I know that one of mine is in here. So here's my first job, and I can go and take that ID and say I want to see the job history for that job. And there's all the execution history for that job. Not only do we have this complete REST API, we actually have a full ready to go DLL that wrappers all this stuff so that you don't even have to deal with the API if you don't want to. But like I said, everything that you could possibly want, you can get through the API. So this is an example of, give me a list of all the things that I can run. So here's the SQL exec function. It tells, you get all the parameters that's required. It's the database connect string. Is it required? Yes. All sorts of choices. So these are all the things that can be run, and the job server automatically pulls them out and makes them available to you. So there's, I think there are, I'd say there's probably 3 dozen different API calls. Lee, would you say, at least altogether? So, this offers a lot of flexibility. As long as you can log in, you can get to the API stuff. So I wanted to, yeah.
This is all going into a SQLite database, is that correct?
That is correct.
Does the job server itself have the ability to prune out log data, or are we going to be responsible for that?
No, so I was answering your last question first. It's not there right now, but we are going to have like a configuration setting that says, delete log data older than such and such. Or anything that's prunable. One nice thing is that this database is really really compact in its storage, and I wish I saved one for you, but I reset everything for this demo. As part of testing, what I've done in the past is I've had these two jobs, which essentially run this guy here. Oops. Dang it. Yeah. So my first job. Oh, let me stop this one because this is going to get in the way. So I've had this one that runs every 10 seconds and this one that runs every 10 minutes. And I've had this thing running for like 5 days straight. And the size of the database, which right now we're storing in the program files, I'm sorry, the program data directory. You know, the largest this has ever gotten after about a week of continuously running a job every 10 seconds is 27 meg. So it is tight and it keeps it small, but you know, I do recognize the need that we don't want to keep keep it growing without bounds. So
Do we also have? Thank you. Do we also have the ability to implement that on a SQL server, or have you thought about that at all?
So technically, we've done it so that we could. One of our concerns was that at its core, I mean, if that's important to you, you know, we can test that. We are using, well, actually, we're not. We wanted to avoid using Entity Framework, which would have given us some measure of portability. There are some SQL variations between SQLite and SQL Server, but we just didn't want to put a burden on anybody who would use this to say, well, you have to have SQL Server and you have to have that available and you have to have a database just for JobServer to do its work.
Understood. Thank you.
I'm happy to explore that. Long term, I mean, if we want to talk about long-term roadmap here, I mean, some of the big kids in this space offer you know, enterprise load balancing where they do have a centralized database and they have all of their server instances pointing to that one place, and they're all trying to figure out how to run which jobs on which services and stuff like that. I'm not sure we're going to get there, but you know, that's certainly a path we could take if there's a lot of interest in how everything else works. So the other thing is that the behavior we've had in the past where you simply can do a hot update of plugins and triggers. Plugins will continue to be hot updatable as well as, you know, drop-in updatable. Triggers will require a restart of the service at some point. So I've given you a tour of the UI. I've shown you the you know, the REST capabilities. What I'd like to do now is, well, actually, I'm going to do two things. First, before I turn it over to Lee is going to give you a, you know, like a quick 10-minute presentation of how to build your own plugin.